Thank you so much for saying. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
I have,
Okay,
right?
thank
Now
you.
you can see it. Perfect. Thank you so
Yes,
much.
it started.
Thank you so much. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about things we did last week or until now, or about anything? Because there's so much to talk about. Rimon, do you have a question? Sorry, because I had some noises, but I didn't know. Okay, everyone cool? Great. So, assimilation, and a nice example of when two consonants or two sounds assimilate to one another, or one assimilates to the other. Usually, for example, we have in Akkadian the itzabat that changed to itzabat, like, so the T assimilates to the tzadi. In Hebrew, the N assimilates to the P. Harmony is just the same as assimilation, only when the segments or the sounds involved are not adjacent, like not immediately connected, like not in immediate contact with each other. So, for example, vowel harmony is very common in certain languages, and Assyrian has this nice sibilant harmony, but that's much, much rarer. In general, consonant harmony is not a very common phenomenon in languages in general at all, only in sibilants. Does it ever happen? Like, usually it doesn't happen at all. It's something that more characteristic of child language, or like production mistakes or something like that, but not a very common process. But vowel harmony is much more common. Dissimilation, so for example, we have dissimilation is usually also long distance, like harmony. So for example, here we have the two labials in Akkadian, so the M and the B in one word. So for some reason, the M changed into N, so it won't be also labial. So if you remember the thing from features, like all of these concern some kind of features. So the difference between A and A, we can talk about the feature that differs between them, or the features that differ between them, or the difference between Tzadi and Taf. Usually things don't assimilate to something that is completely different from them. So there is only one or two features difference. In cases like the N, that assimilates to any consonant or to almost any consonant, that is seen by linguists sometimes as more of a compensatory lengthening than assimilation. Or you can also see it like nasals and codas are in general problematic. But I haven't even explained what a coda is yet, so yeah, wait. But anyway, is everything clear so far?
I have one question.
Yes.
Actually, we've discussed it with Professor Streck. So the case of Hebrew kiseh and Arabic kursi. So
yes.
what's happening there?
That is a dissimilatory R. Sometimes gemination is substituted by dissimilatory, usually pre-nasalization, but sometimes also R or L can happen because sonorants are good codas in general. So that is considered to be a dissimilatory R. Aramaic has this as a rule, and it's much more, or not as a rule, but it's much more common in Aramaic than in Arabic, which probably makes it kursi likely to be some kind of Aramaic influence.
Okay, thanks.
Any other question? Nothing. Okay. Another case of dissimilation we know from Akkadian is what we call Gears law. So instead of having two emphatics in one root, only one of the sounds remains emphatic and the other loses its emphasis. Does anyone know Gears law? Okay, great. And coalescence, we already mentioned this. So it's when two sounds become one sound. So they can be, it could be a merger, it could be like a merger in the case of a stop and a fricative becoming an affricate, or it can also be an average, like coalescence is what happens when a diphthong is contracted, and it can contract it to one of its components or to an average of both of its components. Was that clear? Everything good? Okay, so just reminding features, and now I'm gonna try to explain what a phoneme is. There's a lot of ways to explain this and a lot of definitions. But I would say that a phoneme, well, a phoneme is the smallest vocalic or sound unit that can change the meaning of a word. That's one of the definitions. And it's also the underlying representation, sorry, of any linguistic sound. So when I make linguistic sounds, linguists assume that I have some kind of underlying representation of phonemes behind that. Phonemes are not realized as phonemes, they are realized as other things, sounds, which we call allophones. So each phoneme has different allophones. Allophones are different sounds phonetically. They have a small difference between them usually, but they represent the same underlying phoneme. So for example, in English, if I say the words stop and the word and top, I pronounce the T slightly differently, but we analyze it as the same phoneme, so we understand that it's the same sound. So underlying sound. Was that clear? Okay. For example, from Amharic, the jussive or any other prefix conjugation, there is this palatalization that is a rule of some consonants before E vowel. So S and Sh can be allophones of the phoneme S. So tilibs, you wear, may you wear, or something like that, as opposed to tilibshi, may you wear, feminine. So, but this does not mean that S and Shin are not also phonemes in Amharic. They are. There are words that are distinguished only by this. So two sounds can be allophones and phonemes in the same language. That's important. Any question regarding this or anything else? It's quite complicated. Okay. So minimal pairs is the nice notion of two words distinguished only by one feature, which makes these two sounds that differ only in one feature different phonemes. So in modern Hebrew, gil, kil. There are two different meanings. There are some languages in the world that would not distinguish these two sounds, but in modern Hebrew, we distinguish these two sounds enough so that it can change the meaning of a word. So yeah, that's what I already said. We'll leave that to some other day. We already talked about a few features. So in vowels, the most important features are high and back, or height and backness, or something like that, which refers to the position of the tongue in the mouth. So high vowels are closed vowels, that meaning that they that you need to close the mouth, or relatively close the mouth while producing them, which means that your tongue has to be high, so close to the palate. And back vowels means that that the highest point of your tongue is more back from the palate, like closer to the velar. So back vowels, high back vowels are closest to the velars, and high front vowels are closest to the palate. Was that clear? I said velar instead of velum, but you'll forgive me. Rounded vowels, once again, is just the labialization. So from German, all of you know that you can round a lot of different vowels, front and back. So U and U, U and O are back vowels, and usually back vowels are the ones that are rounded, but German has this nice pair of front round vowels, U and Ö. Thankfully, we don't have that in Semitic. And low vowels, that's just the open vowels, or ah. You have to place the tongue at a low. I'm so sorry, just a second. Make that noise disappear. Okay. And we're not going to talk about the tongue root, so I'm sorry about that. But to understand English vowels, you have to understand this thing with the position of the tongue root, but thankfully we don't have that problem. So if I want to divide Akkadian vowels once again to these features, high and back, that's all I need to distinguish all of these vowels, just for everything clear. We're just running through this. We already did a lot of this. If there's any question, please don't hesitate. And consonant features are usually place features, manner features, or other things. So the places are divided onto labial, coronal, and dorsal. Just so like the features are labial, coronal, and dorsal, and the laryngeals are thought or for some reason represented to have no place. Other place features, palatalization, anteriority, distributedness, and manner features. All of this is very, very technical, so you don't have to understand this or to know this, but the distinction between sonorants and obstruents is important. So sonorants are approximants, rhotics, and nasals, including also glides, which are approximants. So L, M, N, R, W, Y. Those are the sonorants in English, and N also. And all the others are obstruents. So all the stops and fricatives, they are obstruents. Nasals are a little bit special because we have a full blocking of the air in the mouth when we produce them. So they are technically stops. That makes them the only sonorants that are stops, actually. So that are minus cont, which means that they're stopped. So everything is clear so far. It's a little bit complicated and technical, but I think you're dealing very well, hopefully. And emphasis is, once again, as I already said, produced either with ejectiveness or with back emphasis, which is retracted tongue root, velarization, pharyngealization, or uvularization. So we talked about the consonants in Akkadian. There are a lot of alveolars or coronals, as you can see. In most languages, that's the case, especially Semitic. The alveolum is the most productive place of articulation, much more than the lips or the velum, as you can see. And here we also have most of the sonorants. There's one labial sonorant M, but three alveolar sonorants N, L, and R. And also the sibilants, which are all alveolar, and the alveolar stops. Everything clear so far? Okay, because we're going to talk about all of these now, and just the one glottal that I don't know if it existed or not. In general, consonantal processes are, well, it's very outdated, but some people like to divide them onto lenition and fortition, like making a sound weaker, which means a fricative, or voiced, or stronger, which means voiceless or stop. But obviously, it has nothing to do with strength, but it's just a notion that people actually use. I like to think of it as, or modern linguistics likes to think of these processes as just a change in a feature. Some famous processes include apocopy, which is the deletion of a final sound, excrescence, which is the epenthesis of a consonant, sperantization, the change from stop to fricative, degemination, or simplification of a geminate, deaffrication or simplification of an affricate, and debuccalization, that usually means change from a consonant that has a place to a consonant that does not have a place, meaning consonant that is either labial or coronal or dorsal, which turns into a glottal or something like that. So for example, we have the Proto-Semitic and Akkadian shu, shua, as opposed to Proto-West Semitic hu. And palatalization, which means usually making the sound closer to the palate. So if it's a back sound, if it's a dorsal, that means fronting it. And if it's a coronal, that means backing it. And in Semitic languages, we have a lot of palatalization, especially in Ethio-Semitic and modern South Arabian, both of the velars and of the alveolars. Okay. Vocalic processes, deletion, two-sided open syllable, that's a very famous process. So we know it from Akkadian, parisu, parsu. We know it also from Hebrew, but we know it from a lot of languages. It's when a sequence of open syllables just changes into one closed syllable and an open syllable or something like that. And aptixis, or epenthesis of a sound, for example, in Hebrew, popkoren. Yep. Lengthening or shortening, of course, usually depends on the environment. And vowel harmony, as I said, which is just the assimilation of vowels when they're not adjacent. Okay, so in general, looking at phonology, there are two popular methods in modern linguistics, and I'm not gonna just dive too far into this, but just letting you know how people do this. So there's the rule-based systems, which is mainly based on Chomsky and Halley's sound pattern of English, but it has developed since then, 1960 something. So we're looking at a phoneme that becomes an allophone, or an underlying representation that becomes a phonetic realization. So for example, in Akkadian, if we have the word kalbu, and we want to have it in the construct state, it turns into kalb. That's the phonemic or underlying representation, but it cannot be written, or we think also pronounced kalb, because of certain rules. So a vowel is inserted here. Is that clear? Is that correct regarding Akkadian? I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. So like dog of something, right? That makes sense. Okay. So if I wanted to write this in a rule-based system, I would talk about what becomes what. So in a case of epenthesis and aptixis or whatever, there is 0 in the underlying representation that becomes something. Okay, so that is the process that I'm describing here. 0 becomes vowel. Which vowel? Index vowel, which means the same vowel as here. What is here? This is the environment. So UR turns into PR, or underlying representation turns into phonetic realization / in the environment of. So this would be in the environment of between two consonants. So these two consonants have nothing between them. That's the 0 here, okay? And it turns into a vowel. Which vowel? The same vowel as before the first consonant. Okay? Is that clear? Because I'm not gonna talk about this anymore, I think. But it's just a way of showing phonological processes. It has all of these nice gadgets. For example, if we take another one, see, oh, no, never mind. Anyway, a syllable is, okay. Well, there is no definition for syllable, and it's not something that you can measure or test or check. Two different people, speakers of the same language, can have different syllabification thoughts of a word. So for example, justify, you can think of it as, some people would think of it as justify, some people would think of it as justify. So quite confusing. I don't know why we still use this notion, because it's very, very problematic. But this happens to be the environment where most processes happen. So we have to acknowledge it. But there is no definition or anyway, anything for that. Anyway, a syllable is made up of 3 components: an onset, which is the beginning. It could be a consonant, it could be more than one consonant, or it could also be nothing. Like there could be a syllable without an onset also. A nucleus, which all syllables have to have, which is usually a vowel, but some languages can also allow this to be some kind of consonant, usually a sonorant. And a coda, which is the end of the syllable, which means it can also be one or more consonants or not exist at all. So a syllable can be just a vowel, but it can also be consonant, vowel, consonant. It can also be consonant, consonant, vowel, consonant, consonant, and so on. Is that clear? Now, there is this method of looking at syllables in modern linguistics, which is counting the nucleus as a mora, which is a weight unit. And the coda can also be counted as a mora, depends on the language. And this distinguishes light syllables from heavy syllables. So a syllable with 1 mora is a light syllable. A syllable with more than 1 mora is a heavy syllable. Syllable with 3 moras, for example, if a language has morae coda and a cluster for a coda, so VCCC or something like that, that would be an ultra heavy syllable or something like that. Was that clear? I don't know. Okay, hopefully. Now, the next development from thinking of rules was, well, the problem was that rules can describe anything. Like the rules that I showed you, that what's so nice about them is that they can describe any kind of process. But What linguists had trouble with was that it can describe also processes that would never happen. So there's no motivation involved. You just say what happens. So the next thing would be to look at sounds as kind of non-linear beings that have like each of them has a layer or layers of different features. And when two different sounds interact, one can lose its own feature and be connected to the other one's feature. So there we have like the explanation of how this process actually happens and not just the description of the fact that it happened. Now, the last one I'm gonna mention, and this is really, really complicated, so I'm not gonna talk a lot about this, is the newer theory, newer from like 1990 something, but it is still being developed today. It's called optimality theory. And this focuses on the problem or the problem and not the way the language solves it. So for example, if we look at the word lib in Akkadian, once again in the construct state, we saw that kalb becomes kalab, but lib becomes, does anyone remember which one of these options? So these are just different options of realization, and they are each ranked by how many constraints they violate. So what are constraints? Constraints are things that languages don't like or something like that. But obviously, every word violates some kind of constraint. So languages differ in the way they rank the different constraints by importance. So max is the nickname for a constraint that means do not delete anything. So languages obviously delete things, but there is still a linguistic constraint that says to the language, please do not delete anything. Some languages have it very high in their ranking, some languages have it very low, okay? So lib, this option of deleting making the word shorter or something like that, so deleting this mora or something like that, violates the constraint max, and so is like disqualified. So if this constraint is ranked high, so the asterisk means the violation, and the exclamation points means the disqualification. So the next constraint, ident long, that means please do not change the feature long. So ident could be just please do not change some kind of feature. So in this case, this would be violated by all of these forms that have a vowel between the geminate. I hope this was clear, but it's okay if not. I'm not gonna say anything more about this, but just so you know, if you see like a phonology paper from the last 20 years, it will probably have this table called a tableau. And it's a nice way to look at things, but it's very, very complicated. As I said, it focuses on the problem rather than on the solution. Different languages solve the same problems in different ways. So languages don't like certain things, and they have different strategies for solutions. I hope that was clear. We will have a forced break in like 3 minutes, but that might be good before I talk about this. So the next part of the class is going to survey the phonemic inventory of Proto-Semitic, so to say, and just look at a few of the realization in the different languages. So, for example, if we look at the consonant B or B or bit, We can see that the phonology manifests itself in the lexicon. So we have the verb to come in all of these languages. And from that, we can see what happened to be in all of these languages. Is that clear? Any question? You have time for questions now. It'll be a shame to forfeit it. Okay. So do you want to continue with this already? You don't want any questions? Are you sure? Because it is very, very complicated. So fine. So I hope everyone knows already these words for to come. You can see them in so many Semitic languages. All of them have bet, vav, aleph, except for sebeg that has hey in this nice place, and it means to come or to enter or something like that. And unfortunately, modern South Arabian and Aramaic don't have this word, which is something I'm going to say a lot in the coming hour or so. P is a little bit more interesting. As I've already mentioned, it has shifted to F, which is a form of lenition or Esperantization in South Semitic. So Ethio-Semitic, Modern South Arabian, Old South Arabian, and North Arabian. Once again, this is not a branch, this is an areal group, and this is an areal shift. In Hebrew and Aramaic, we have Esperantization that is conditioned by something. Yes.
When in Hebrew, was it from the beginning or did it happen?
The Esperantization?
Yes.
It must have happened at some point. It couldn't be inherited from Proto-Hebrew or something like that.
So
It is an aerial phenomenon of Hebrew and Aramaic.
And when did it happen?
No one really knows. Maybe sometime in the
Before the Bible?
not before the Bible. No, well, which